easy against Colgate in this game in round one, but the next opponent might have made it look even easier. This is Locked On Baylor postgame.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor postgame. I am your host, Cam Stewart from ESPN Central Texas. I am live here from my hotel room, which is in Memphis, Tennessee, which is just about 200 yards away as the crow flies from the court that Baylor just won their opening round game against Colgate on. That was 92-67, just a dominant performance from the Bears, really from minute one. They really didn't need to take it out of second gear for a large portion of that game. So the fifth straight tournament, I believe, which ties the longest active streak of winning at least one game in the NCAA tournament, that belongs to the Baylor Bears. And they will take on the Clemson Tigers, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show. But this was kind of a massacre in of itself. Not the best basketball game ever played, but Clemson rolls over New Mexico 77-56. Lobos certainly had their chances in this one. Like, no doubt they did. It was just mostly just a really cold shooting night from New Mexico. Anyway, we're going to talk about that later. We're talking about Baylor first. A dominant performance, like I said. Colgate, the more you looked into it, the more you were like, Colgate just is not built for this kind of game. And they're not. In fact, I was just on with the Matt Mosley show on ESPN Central Texas, which I do every day from 3 to 6. And Mosley read it out on the air, but he got a text from one of Baylor's assistant coaches that said, it's funny how good our offense is when the other team can't tackle us. When they actually have to guard us, we're pretty good. And that is the disparity, how different these two teams are. I mean, playing for the Patriot League versus playing in the Big 12 as the Bears do, it was just an onslaught from moment one, and they could not guard Colgate. And honestly, the biggest thing, before I get into the numbers, the biggest thing for me in terms of the eye test that was the biggest discrepancy was Baylor, you have to guard all five guys. Like, it seems so simple, but there's just some guys at Colgate that where they are in their position on the floor, you don't have to guard them. And we saw it a lot early on. Like Braden Smith was the Patriot League Player of the Year, tremendous player, was the only one they were really contesting from three-point land. There was one guy who was getting the ball, 15 feet from the basket, and Baylor was backing off him because they knew he couldn't hit that shot. So that is something, and there are big, major conference teams that are like that in this tournament. But Baylor, you got to guard 1 through 5, and you really got to guard 1 through 5. And for the Bears today, 4 players in double figures in terms of scoring, and then 2 more who had 9 and 8 at the center position. That's Misi and Ojamuna. So really sharing the rock today. Ray J. Dennis goes for 10 points and 9 assists, so very close to a double-double. Jacoby Walter had a really good start with 19 points on the game. Jalen Bridges with 23. He leads all scorers in that category. He had 18 of those in the second half. But it was Jacoby who was the one out of the gate. He has 19 for the game, 15 of those in the first half. I think he hit his first 3 shots. He had a blocked shot in there. He got fouled from beyond the 3-point arc twice in that first half. So that was something that really stuck out to me in the early going, was he was hunting his shot. I don't know if it's him telling himself this or the coaches telling him this, and I would probably lean towards the latter, of someone getting in Jacoby's head and saying, you are the best player. They can't guard you. There ain't anybody here who can guard you. And most players in this tournament cannot guard you. So go out there and find your points. I know you're going to always do what's good for the team. Right now, first half, round of 64, what is good for the team is you to go out there, get aggressive, find your shot, score us some points. And that's what he did. Again, 19 points for the game, and the shooting numbers go down in the second half. So you look at the box score and you're like, 4 from 11, 3 of 8 from 3, which is okay. That's fairly good. I don't know. But then you look at the first half where he's really hunting his shot instead of just getting to the free throw line, and you're like, okay, that looks like a guy who gave us a pretty good shift out there. Jaden Nunn, who did he have the best game of anybody? Probably not, but he was a guy who was struggling coming into this tournament. Really down those last 3 or 4 games, he wasn't much of an offensive factor. He had reverted to the shooting splits that we had seen earlier in the conference schedule before he really broke out in February. And today he got back to it. 15 points, 5 of 8 from the floor, 4 of 5 from 3. And also added 3 assists, which is not a number that he usually gets to because he's a shooting guard. But he had to play some time at the point with Ray J. Dennis on the bench, which is something I want to highlight in terms of a good 5 minutes for Baylor. It was about 4 or 5 minutes left in the first half. Ray J. Dennis goes out with his 3rd foul. It wasn't a good sequence for the Bears. They were up, I think 16 or 18 at that point, but Josh O played great defense in the post one-on-one for like 10 whole seconds and forces a bad shot, bad miss. Baylor doesn't box out. Colgate gets the rebound. It was an air ball, so they still don't have a lot of time on the shot clock. And this guy kind of crafty move, tries to put one up over Ray J, and Ray J commits the foul. Wasn't a lot there, but it was his 3rd foul. And we know Baylor does not have a backup point guard, and they were not only able to keep pace, but extend that lead before the half with Jaden Nunn and Jacoby Walter handling the ball. So that was big. Jalen Bridges could not miss in the second half. I mean, that was a clinic he put on. He goes 4 from 6 from 3 in the second half, and it was just like one after the other after the other. At one point, Baylor had hit 4 straight threes on 4 straight possessions, and Colgate even mixed in a couple of 3-pointers in there, and Baylor just had the answer every time. This was men against boys. It looked like, not that Colgate didn't show a fight, but they were outclassed in this one. And I understand that part of this, there's some luck involved in terms of shooting 53% from 3. Like, we know this is a good 3-point shooting team, but even on a good day, that's, you're shooting 42%. They, at one point in the second half, were shooting like 60% from 3. They hit 4 of their first 5. So I get there is some randomness to that, but against some other teams, that might still be a double-digit victory instead of a 25-point victory like it was on this day against Colgate. Looking at some of the other numbers, the only one that concerned me was turnovers. Baylor had 12, Colgate had 8. Now, 12 turnovers for an NCAA tournament game is not bad. In fact, that's probably where you want to live, right there, right? I don't love losing the turnover battle by 4 against a team like Colgate, and the Raiders made the most of that, by the way. They went 16 points off those 12 turnovers. So I don't love that number, or that discrepancy, I should say. Don't mind the number. 12 turnovers, if you're going to have that, you're going to win games in this tournament. It's when you start getting to 15 or above, that's when you're throwing it away. And I didn't think they were very careless with the basketball. But that 12 point, or that 12 turnovers was kind of what surprised me. Baylor +9 in the rebounding department, -10 in bench points. Again, that's one I bring up a lot, guys. That's one I'm always trying to look for in this tournament. And without Langston Love, that's a huge difference. And you probably won't have Langston for this tournament. Colgate also outscores Baylor in the paint, but it's really shooting 58% from the floor and 53% from 3. Whereas Colgate shoots 46% from the floor and 28% from 3. And a lot of that had to do with Baylor's defense and being strategic. I thought they played actually pretty good defense today, all told. So I think a pretty academic victory for the Bears today. Now, looking at Clemson, that was a runaway in that game. And I was doing the Mosley show, so I didn't get to really key in on it. I had it on in the background. I was paying attention to it. I'm going to watch some of it back tomorrow before we get that matchup on Sunday. But to me, what I was seeing and what I heard people talking about coming out of the game here in Memphis was Clemson played better, but it wasn't the blowout it seemed. It looked like New Mexico just couldn't buy a basket. Every time I looked, they were getting good looks. They just couldn't get it to go in. And that's part of the randomness of the NCAA tournament. Sometimes you just have a horrific shooting, and knock on wood, I hope that's not Baylor at some point here, but that looked like looks like that's what happened to New Mexico. That was a darling of a team that was a favorite, according to Vegas, as an 11 seed over a 6 seed, which I was really surprised to see. And I said this on the show this week I think we hyped up New Mexico too much. Like that's a fine team, and Pitino did a good job with them, but this was a team that was not going to be in the tournament. Brandon McKinnon was the one who said it first on this show earlier in the week. Actually, they were not supposed to be in the tournament. They needed to win the conference tournament to get into the big dance. So why all of a sudden are we putting this much stock in a team like that? Because we weren't doing that with NC State, who, by the way, backed it up and handled Texas Tech. But I don't think it was that much of a wave of, oh boy, watch out for NC State. They're hot. Like, we knew they were hot, but it was not the darling pick that New Mexico was. And Clemson has been solid all year. They'll play a tough brand of basketball, and I am excited to see that matchup. I am excited to hopefully stick it to Brad Brownell, who is talking about how the Big 12 manipulates the net rankings and that the ACC should have more teams in there and the Big 12 shouldn't have as many, questioning what this conference is. And he's going to get a heavy dose of it on Sunday. He's going to get what was in the regular season the third best team in the conference, but with the number one strength of schedule in America. So I guess be careful what you wish for. I know he's mostly talking about TCU and UT and at the time schools like Oklahoma, and talking about their chances of getting in versus Pitt. But I'm hoping that he's going to find out on this day. And one thing that I will talk about, we'll put something out tomorrow as well in the day in between games, but I'm always interested in the mindset of these teams going into the tournament. A team like Baylor, we remember in 2021, they had a goal of winning the whole thing, like from day one, basically, and they brought everyone back. I remember specifically after that Villanova win in the Sweet 16, they had the camera on those guys going to the locker room. They were saying, three more. So they didn't have their eyes set on the Elite Eight or the Final Four or just being there. They had their sights set on winning the whole thing. And I actually asked Bill Peterson, the Baylor assistant coach, yesterday on the Mosley Show. I asked, is that something you guys talk about? Are you comfortable talking about that? And he said, for every team, but for this team, Scott Drew showed the bracket to the guys when they were out here in Memphis before they took the court. This was, in the buildup the days before, showed them their bracket. And it was Baylor versus Colgate. And that was it. So as cliche as we make it, that it's one game at a time, for this team, they are taking it one game at a time. And one positive note that comes out of this, well, there's plenty of positive notes. And this is not a slight to any of the other assistant coaches, but with the Clemson victory, that actually means John Jacobs will be doing the scout for Baylor. And he is obviously a great X's and O's guy, tremendous in the film room. And his most famous scout was against his old team, Gonzaga, in 2021. So let that be hopefully a nice, good news. Good news for that one. Just a couple of comments here. We'll go to Aiden, who says, hopefully Misi's back injury isn't too bad. Yeah, and I had heard it was his ribs or his back. I was in the arena, so I don't know. But he did get kind of taped up early, had a little thing on his shoulder, but then ended up playing the rest of the game. It wasn't one of his best nights, wasn't a terrible night by any means. He ends up going for 9 points in this one and just 3 rebounds. He only played 16 minutes in the game. So, yeah, I mean, once the score got out of hand, they definitely sat him a little bit. Scott Drew said after the game that he feels okay about it. Misi, I think, has missed just one game this year or didn't start one game this year. He didn't start game one, but I think there was one game that he missed, and that was it. So for a guy who was, raw and still filling out his body at 18 years old, he's done a good job with staying healthy and taking the beating that's been given to him in the Big 12. So I think he'll be okay from what we heard, but I'm no doctor. We thought Langston Love would be okay. He gets 3 separate ankle injuries 3 separate ways. So don't know, but certainly he didn't look like he was slowed up at all. One last shout out I got to give. I can't believe it took me this long. Josh O. Terrific game. Again, flashing the potential of what he can give you in terms of that Jonathan Chamachacho role off the bench in 2021. He doesn't have quite the athleticism, and he's not going to play quite as above the rim. But Josh O, 8 points, 4 for 4 from the floor, 7 rebounds. I'll take that. I'll take that any day of the week. And if you're going to get that, even if he does have to play the minutes today, which by the way was 22, 6 more than Yves Missi. So even if this is something that slows Yves Missi down, we need this kind of Josh O. And in fact, no matter how much Missi plays, we could really do with this Josh O. I thought he played some terrific defense today, once again showing kind of that defensive versatility. Was in there for some lobs, had a steal and a breakaway dunk. So I was real impressed with Josh O today, and I would, if you're able to get that out of him as the competition gets better, which we have seen, he's had games like that in the Big 12, then the sky is kind of the limit. So big shouts to Josh O today. Probably second for me for player of the game, him and Jacoby behind Jalen Bridges. Although I liked what both Josh O and Jacoby did in their separate times of the game. And that really propelled Baylor to this 25-point victory. Anyway, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this post game. Another fun day. 5 straight years, 5 straight tournaments where you've won the first round, and it's been the second round that's been the demon. And we're going to talk more about that in a special episode tomorrow. But that's the hump you got to get over right now. The rest is kind of gravy, but you got to get over that second round hump. And it's not going to be easy with Clemson, man. As much as I would love to meme them for what their coach was saying, I said that from day one, bringing up those Brad Brownell comments, was this is a good team. Solid team in the ACC. I thought they were better than UVA all year. They were better than Pitt all year. And that's why they've won a tournament game. And those two teams did not. So anyway, we'll talk more about that a little bit tomorrow in the day in between games. We'll also talk about the women's game and how that's going. It's just tipped off if you're listening to this live. So we'll have some more on that and looking ahead at that matchup on Sunday. Let me know what you think about this game. Am I reading too much into it? Let me know what you think about Clemson, what you think Baylor's chances are. Get that down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow because the madness does not stop here on your favorite program, which is, of course, Locked On Baylor.